Today's subject on endocrine patient part
because
Dr. Suman, Bhusan, his all for Zoology. His testing to tackling his in this research related to aquaculture and fish biology. At present, he is engaged in research work on reproductive endocrinology and stress physiology in fish models. He has presented his research work in various international and national conferences, and he has got research funding from different national funding agencies. He has published more than 60 papers in different national and international peer-reviewed journals with high impact. With this few words, I also like to add one more line that Dr. Chakraborty is my beloved Suman, and he is known to me since his student period. He was not only a brilliant student or a brilliant scholar, actually, he is a really very polite, humble, and helpful and down to earth guy, and very much helpful to each and every students and even uh, all persons. And really, I wish all his best in life. So I wish that audience will really enjoy his exciting and interesting talk. Thank you, the team Biomix.
yeah. Thank you so much for your generous introduction, ma'am. With this kind words, I now welcome our guest speaker, Suman Bhushan Chakraborty, for us talk. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you. First, I would like to thank Shupriti for her nice introduction, and really, I'm very much privileged for this, Shupriti. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your kind words. And then I would again put my gratitude to the Biomix team for inviting me in this coveted platform to deliver whatever I'm going to say. So, with this few introductory words, I would like to present my screen, and during that time, it's better if I just switch off the video mode. So that would be a bit more comfortable for me as well. So I'm
Yeah,
just
sure.
going to, okay, fine. So I'm just going to switch off the video and starting to present. Just inform me if there is any problem related to presenting the whole thing. Okay.
Yeah, sure, sir.
Okay. Okay, so the topic of my today's lecture is basically endocrinal approaches to manipulate animal production, ensuring food security in the 21st century. Now, we all know that yes, food security is going to be one of the very important issues of past as well as of present, and it is going to be an issue of future as well. But before we go, how to the scientific part of it, how to have these endocrinal approaches, how we can use this endocrinological knowledge to manipulate the animal production. I'm just trying to give some glimpses about what is meant by food security. Whenever we talk about food security, there is actually two different sides of this terminology. On one end of the side is the consumers. And for the consumers, food security is definitely something which is related to the consumers should get a sufficient amount of nutritious food which is safe and culturally must be appropriate for them, because we have different group of people have different preferences or different orientations for feeding, and safe amount and adequate amount of food must be given according to the choice, according to the appropriateness of food to the consumers. And those food must be produced in an environmentally sustained manner. That is another important issue, that we just cannot consider about producing something without considering about nature. And on the other part of the side is definitely the producers. So whenever you are talking about food for the consumers, the security also means that the producers are able to produce food in an environmentally sustainable manner. But besides being environmentally sustainable, they should also be profitable for the entrepreneurs who are producing the food. So unless and until the people who are producing food get some economic advantage from producing them, they're definitely not going to produce food. So of course, the producers must be able to earn a decent amount of money, which is sustainable for their living as well. So considering this, it's a holistic orientation. Whenever we are talking about food security, that on the other hand, one hand, we have to think about the consumers so that they get food. And on the other hand, we have to think about the producers so that they are able to produce food. And all together with this holistic orientation, whenever you're talking about food security, these three A's are actually very much important. This can be considered to be the pillars of food security. Okay? One is availability, one is accessibility, and the last one, but definitely not the least, is the affordability of food to all people. So whenever we are deciding or we are considering about food security, we must ensure the supply chain of food. Food must be produced, it must be stocked, it must be marketed in such a way that it is physically available to all potential consumers. That's the very basic thing we have to do for ensuring food security, that it has to be produced and it has to be delivered to everybody. Now, the second one, that is access to food. That is not always going with availability. We have seen different scenarios, whereas wherever we are finding the situation, maybe there is sufficient amount of food being present in the storehouses, but that is not being accessed by most group of people because of different issues. I won't be going to those economic concepts, but there are situations where it happen that adequate supply of food is there, but it is not ensuring or it is not guaranteeing that every member of a household is actually getting food. So that is also a very much important aspect of food security. Unless and until food is being delivered or food can be accessed by every member of the society, we cannot ensure food security to them. Then, okay, fine. We have food available, we have access to food. But what about the health? If the general health of the people is not good enough for utilization, we are consuming food, but the quality of food is not good, we are not utilizing the food to the fullest nutrient availability, then it makes it very difficult to ensure food security. So the third part of this whole scenario is basically related to the physiological aspects associated with the consumers, that whatever food is being consumed by a person that must be fully utilized. The nutrients available within the food had to be utilized by the subject who is consuming the food. So that varies depending on the feeding practices, the care that is being given while preparing the food, the diversity of diet in between different communities and in between different individuals, and the intra-household distribution of food as well. So often we get to the scenario that if the amount of food is being limited, not all members of the household is getting equal amount of nutrition. That's maybe related to gender equity, maybe related to the social status or status of the members within the family. So there are situations, there are scenarios where food utilization is not equal for all members of the family. And all together, this availability, access, and utilization must have a stabilized condition, must have a stabilized orientation over time. So considering this stabilization or this orientation over time, we can go to the next concept where simply we can think of a situation, the opposite part of security is definitely hunger. So if people don't have food, we feel hungry, and hunger is definitely one of the most important problem of our society of today's world. And this can be extrapolated in two different orientation. One is seasonal hunger. Sometimes there is drought or overraining, and due to different sort of agricultural activities in the rural regions and the urban areas, because of so many problems, there can be seasonal hunger where food are not available for a particular period of time over a year. Or it may be associated with a person not getting enough job to procure money so that the person can buy food for throughout a year or for a substantial period of time. But on the other hand, this seasonal hunger can ultimately go to become chronic hunger if this non-availability of food is being persisted for a very long period of time. If the person is subjected to inadequate diet for a very long period of time, or the poor people who are suffering from non-availability of food for a very long period of time, we have observed in different countries where these scenarios are there. There is a non-availability of nutritious food for a very long period of time, leading to chronic hunger among the people. So if we just look into this worldwide data associated with the hungry people in the world, it's 4 years back, it's around the data from 2014, 2016 in a million of it. And India is very ignominiously situated at the topmost position. We in our country have that much million of people who go undernourished throughout a very long period of time. So that is not a good scenario for us, though we are finding it okay, it's decreasing over the years. But anyway, we have to look into this, and that's why we must be very much careful about the production of food, and so that we can just give proper nutrition to all members of our country, all the people of our country. And if we look into the health aspect associated with food security, they go side by side, or rather they go hand in hand. If we can ensure food and nutritional security to people, definitely we are going to have a healthy people, healthy population. So in order to ensure healthy population in the country, we must provide them with balanced diet. And providing them balanced diet also includes that minimum amount of food should be wasted. So we have to look into this into two aspects. One is we have to give them proper amount, adequate amount of healthy, nutritious food, and we have to ensure we have to reduce the amount of food which is being wasted. Now, once we get to this healthy people would be supported with healthy animals. Now, healthy animals definitely can be produced if we are producing food which is safe for human consumption. So whenever we are talking about endocrinal manipulation associated with feeding or associated with animal production, that is very fundamental aspect of animal consumption. That how the animals are being produced, whether the production system, the production channel for these animals are being healthy enough, and the food which is being produced are safe for human consumptions. Often we have seen this type of newspaper cuttings that, okay, the prawns which is being exported from India is being banned. The European countries, the Americans, they are not buying our prawns simply because of residual levels, a higher level of antibiotic residues, higher level of hormonal residues. So all these issues are very much important to produce food safe for human consumption. And then the diseases, we are all concerned about this corona pandemic today, whether, and the debate is going on, whether it has come from our a diverse food habit. We are consuming different type of animal products, and definitely we are subjected to zoonotic diseases by consuming different type of food. And if the food are not being processed or produced in a healthy way, the chance that people would be susceptible to this type of zoonotic diseases become more. So definitely we need to produce healthy animals, which would also minimize the chance that human getting infected by while consuming animal products. And on the other hand, whenever we are having these healthy animals, healthy animal means not only they are providing us with healthy food, but also they are becoming more producers. So they are growing more. So definitely they are going to produce more. So more animal source food can be generated, and more productive animals can be generated by producing healthy animals. And this can again goes to a healthy ecosystem. So whenever we have healthy people and healthy animals, we get a healthy ecosystem where the environmental services can be protected. We minimize the emission of greenhouse gases. We minimize the use of natural resources, and exploitation of nature becomes minimized because we can now produce our own food. Whenever the primitive men, they have started from capturing wild animals to harvesting and farming animals, domestic animals, then we have just shifted from capture to culture. And nowadays, that's the motto. We have to shift our intensity from capture to culture. We have to intensify the culture system, but keeping in mind that environment should be protected while developing the mechanisms by which the culture farming of animals is producing a minimum amount of, or destroying the environment to the minimal amount. Okay. And so we have to be very much careful for utilization of the natural resources, minimizing the pollutions, and all together they form a sort of triangle within which we get the healthy ecosystems, the people, animals, and of course ultimately leading to food and nutritional security among different people. Now, again, this is the last slide related to this food security problem. And if you just look into the states of India, which is actually facing the problems of food insecurity, I would say rather, we are facing a great deal of hunger among the people of these states. And West Bengal, our state, is definitely having a place within them, which is not a good thing to be, actually. Now, with all this introductory part of having to look for secured food production, I'm coming to the main points to be discussed today. That is how endocrinology, how the knowledge of endocrinology can actually be used for increasing animal productions. And by increasing the animal production, how can we ultimately go for producing more amount of proteinaceous food? Because we all know I am mainly concerned with, because I am a zoology people, so I am definitely being concerned with animal production of animals. And by producing more animals which are healthy, we would be able to give a nutritious amount of food, or nutritious food rich in proteins to people. So there must be a good source of protein in our food as well. So that has to be taken into consideration. So how hormones actually can help in producing food. We will be considering two aspects. There are many things which can be dealt with respect to animal production, but for today's lecture, I have concentrated on two things. We can actually endocrinally manipulate reproduction in animals so that the total production level is being increased, and we can manipulate growth in animals as well so that we can get a more amount of body mass from individual animal. So these two are the two main objectives of increasing animal production through endocrinal manipulation. On one hand, we can just increase the total production by increasing the number of animals available in the farm, or we can increase, or it should be, and we can also increase the body mass of individual animal or the growth of individual animal to gain to have more amount of food available from one particular individual. And endocrinology is definitely helping us to get there, becoming one by one to these two. Just looking into, this particular slide. If we just consider the basic orientation of hypothalamo-hypophyseal and the subsequent target organ axis, and consider the first thing related to the endocrinal manipulation to modulate reproduction, you'd simply look into the hypothalamo-hypophyseal gonadal axis, where the hypothalamus is supposed to produce the regulatory factors like the gonadotropin releasing hormone, the GnRH. There are varieties of GnRH hormones which are being present in different group of animals, and works are being going on, GnRH1, GnRH2, and which particular GnRH is affecting the subsequent hormonal axis. And then altogether, this GnRH is regulating the functional activity of anterior pituitary. And from the anterior pituitary, we are having two different types of gonadotropin hormones, the FSH and the LH. And often it's been considered that there are mostly GnRH are regulating LH secretions, and some people say, at least whenever I have worked with fish models, I have found that, okay, there is GnRH1, GnRH2. One of the hormone, the GnRH1, is mainly associated with regulation of FSH, whereas GnRH2 is associated with regulation of LH. And some group of people says, no, it's not two different GnRHs, but the lack of GnRH or the quantification of GnRH, a minimum amount of GnRH, it induces FSH secretion. Whenever the GnRH secretion is more, it goes on to induce LH secretion in fishes. So altogether, the axis remains the same, GnRH from hypothalamus, stimulating secretion of gonadotropic hormones, FSH and LH from anterior pituitary, and FSH and LH in turn is regulating the growth and the endocrinal function of the gonads. So the FSH is mainly associated with the follicular growth in the females, and again in the growth of testicular structure in males, whereas the LH is mainly oriented with the hormonal production. The gonadal steroids are being regulated by LH, as well as the follicular, or rather the emission of the follicle, the ovulation process in females is being regulated by LH. So if we can manipulate this entire hypothalamo-hypophyseal gonadal axis, we can actually have our orientation with respect to manipulation of reproduction. We can induce reproductive orientation in animals by manipulating this axis. And people have worked on this. People have done these things. They have manipulated this entire axis so that we can actually lead for increased production in animals. On the other hand, there is the secretion of this GHRH, or growth hormone releasing hormone, from hypothalamus, which in turn is again regulating pituitary for secretion of growth hormone, which can actually have a direct effect over the different organs, or can have an effect over liver for production of IGF-1, the growth factor 1, so that altogether there is a synergistic effect to increase growth of the individual. So those two are our main concern today, how we can modulate the HPA-G axis, the hypothalamo-pituitary model axis, and how we can modulate the hypothalamic pituitary and the growth hormone axis for that matter. There is no definite trophic organ, target organ for growth hormone, but which is again producing another different hormones. But we have there's a liver as producing IGF, and of course the targets as the bones and the muscles for increasing growth. On the rightmost side, we have CRH really being released from hypothalamus again, and regulating acetate secretion for anterior pituitary. In turn, today morning, Supradevi has discussed a lot about this glucocorticoids and how they are associated with maintenance of physiological homeostasis, and that is also very much important for regulation of growth and reproduction. Unless and until we can maintain our physiological homeostasis, we can have a basal level of physiological activity, we cannot think of increasing our reproduction, increasing our growth. Growth and reproduction is definitely being oriented with healthy animals. So in order to maintain health, we need to have these glucocorticoids and the hypothalamo-hypophyseal adrenal axis, the HPA axis, to work properly for maintenance of this growth and reproduction. And manipulation in either of these three can actually is oriented with endocrinal manipulation of animal production. So you can just look into this schematic diagram. We have discussed it a bit, but again, just to recapitulate, this is the anterior pituitary producing the growth hormone, and in turn, the growth hormone can actually have a direct effect on bones, like increasing the bone length and bone mass density. And there are some autocrine and paracrine activity of IGF as well. Growth hormone mainly stimulates secretion of IGF from liver, which again has effect on bones, on muscles, on adipose tissue. And from the adipose tissue, we can have a secretion of adiponectin and leptin, these two different hormones, which are very much important with hunger, because these two hormones are increasing lipolysis, reducing lipogenesis, and causing browning of fat, and having an impact over pituitary and hypothalamic axis, over the neurological axis of hunger, where they regulate our feeding mechanism. So we feel satiated by secretions of adiponectin and leptin. These are two different hormones being released by adipose tissue, which are often being oriented with this hunger in a opposite sense. They regulate our feeling of being hungry, like adiponectin, which is actually an adipokine involving in regulating glucose level, and fatty acid breakdown functionally associated with insulin. So they are maintaining the glucose level, and if there is no adiponectin, people become insensitive to insulin. There is a problem associated with diabetes mellitus, and they are being produced primarily in adipose tissue, but some amount is also being produced in muscle, and even a certain amount is being produced in brain as well. And for leptin, it is also being released by the white adipose tissues and being associated with food intake. They regulate the amount of food intake. Once adipose tissue is becoming full, they just go on increasing secretion of leptin, setting the hypothalamic satiation center that yes, okay, no more food is being required, so stop feeding. And if there is a problem with leptin secretion, there is a tendency of overeating and then becoming ill due to overeating as well. So altogether, we can have a different manipulating orientation. And if you want to manipulate the amount of fatty deposition, or if sometimes we get the idea that in KFC chicken, the chicken, they are being overfed and becoming very large in size with more amount of fatty substances being deposited. So all these manipulating things, because you just don't go on feeding some animal, if you just go for endocrinal manipulation as well, they would be having more, they would feel more hungry, they would just consume more amount of food, will try to grow bigger, will have a different sort of dysfunctions. They can always, they are not healthy for that matter. So those manipulations has to be considered as well. The first thing we'll be discussing about is associated with animal breeding, how we can manipulate endocrinally the breeding mechanism so that the amount of food, amount of animals we get are becoming more. So endocrinal manipulation associated with breeding can actually have different aspects. The first thing is the hypothalamic hormonal system that we are getting into. And often the type of food you are giving to the animal, or the type of veterinary drugs, or the amount of the nature of hormones you are giving to the animals can manipulate this hypothalamic hormonal system. Like this calcium and copper in food can actually stimulate the hypothalamus to produce GnRH. So whenever you are, it's a very basic level of endocrinal manipulation. So you add calcium, or you give more amount of copper in the food, and that can actually stimulate the production of GnRH by the hypothalamus, and that would in turn would signal the pituitary to increase FSH and LH. So if you are being involved in cattle industry and dairy industry and want to have a calving female, calving cow, so you definitely can manipulate that by adding this type of micronutrients into the food that would ultimately manipulate the hormone system to go for reproduction. Then the FSH and LH, which is being produced by the anterior pituitary, they are traveling to the blood into the ovaries, and the production of FSH and LH, as we have talked about, can be manipulated with this addition of calcium, copper, or zinc in the food. And once in the ovary, the corpus luteum, which is producing progesterone, this endocrinal product, this steroid hormone, can again be manipulated by just adding magnesium or manganese in the food. So by simple manipulation of feeding micronutrients, we can actually alter the endogenous endocrinal titer, thereby leading to better production or higher production. So this is a very simplistic orientation of endocrinal manipulation. Now PGF2 alpha, which is being released by the uterus, which causes regression of the corpus luteum. Now PGF2 alpha secretion is being oriented with copper. Potassium can actually stimulate the ovaries to produce estrogen, and potassium and estrogen secretion can also be manipulated with the presence of this copper, potassium, magnesium, zinc. Just by the manipulation of food substances, we can have endogenous regulatory orientations associated with breeding. Now, just if we look into the female reproductive hormones, which are mainly associated with the entire process of reproduction, we know that the follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, in the peri-ovulatory follicles which are undergoing growth, the follicle, this FSH is being involved in follicular development and the early maturation of. So manipulation of FSH can actually increase or can actually alter the rate of growth with respect to this ovarian follicles. So you can have a greater number of follicles being matured at a time with respect by manipulating FSH. Whereas LH, which is related to ovulation, so manipulation of LH can actually lead to a situation where ovulation, the process of release of the ovum, of the mature ovum, can be manipulated. And by manipulating estrogen level in the subject, we can induce estrus. We can actually identify the behavioral signs of estrus. These are mainly estrogen guided processes where the level of estrogen regulates when the female will come into heat, and this psychic heat is basically associated with secretion of different pheromonal substances to attract the mate, and and whenever the female is being approached by the male, whether the female is accepting the male to copulate with, that is also be regulated with these estrus phases. And the behavioral signs of estrus, those are mainly can be associated with estrogen, whereas progesterone, we all know that the name suggests it is basically the hormone for gestation. So progesterone, it prevents the ovulation and it maintains pregnancy. So whenever a subject is pregnant, there is an increased level of progesterone, which maintains the gestational period, and that will be important for pregnancy maintenance. And whenever there is the time from the once so of that initial is is stimulus to the pituitary follicles, more FSH and more follicular growth. But as the process proceeds to the pituitary follicle, after they have been completely grown, they need to go for maturation, start the process of meiotic division to become haploid, to produce the haploid egg, and that egg should be released from the ovary. So in order to facilitate that, gradually there would be decreased amount of estrogen. The functional effect of FSH would be downregulated, and with increased GnRH2 or increased GnRH production from the hypothalamus, that will stimulate LH production. So there will be reduced FSH with increased LH, and LH in turn will cause the functional maturation of the ovum and ultimate ovulation process, ultimate the release of egg into the oviduct, which occurs at around 12 to 24 hours after estrus in cows. So if you just consider the bovine as a model, take that around 12 to 24 hours after, once the female cow has reached estrus, ovulation will take place. And there is a very intricate balance of this FSH, LH, and estrogen, which will regulate the process of follicular growth and ovulation. So if there is any change, any discrepancy in the balance between FSH and LH and ultimately estrogen, this process can be entirely disrupted. And sometimes we are finding that there is a bleeding which is taking place at the end of the cycle, but that does not happen for every estrus. And once ovulation has taken place, the ovulated follicles, they would be transformed into corpus luteum. And if anybody is an artificial breeder, that person must have a very thorough knowledge about the reproductive physiology of his subject. Okay, the reproductive physiology of cow or any other, for that matter, goat or whatever cattle breed you are producing. The total reproductive cycle knowledge is very important, because in case of cows, as we are finding, the most successful, if you want to perform artificial insemination, which is mostly being done today, we don't go for natural insemination. Rather, semen are being collected from the studs or from the coveted bulls, and those are artificially inseminated. And this collection of semen, storage of semen, and artificial insemination, definitely these are costly process. So you have to be very sure to gain maximum advantage, to gain maximum success with respect to this artificial insemination. So while doing this artificial insemination, the stage of the reproductive cycle of the female cow must be very well understood. Okay, it has to be done at around 12 hours after the beginning of distress. So definitely insemination should precede the process of ovulation. So unless and until one person don't have a very thorough knowledge about the reproductive physiology of the cow, definitely he won't be a good breeder or a good producer of the cattle. Then once the animal is pregnant, of course, the corpus luteum will primarily be producing the progesterone for maintenance of gestational period. And we do have two different types of corpus luteal orientation. One for the animals which are not pregnant. So in those cases, the existence, the lifespan of corpus luteum is comparatively limited. Whereas if the animal is pregnant, then of course it undergoes certain physiological changes, which stimulates more maintenance of corpus luteum. And this longer maintained corpus luteum can actually be maintained through most part of the pregnancy. On the other hand, it is maintaining pregnancy altogether. And once at the later phase, there's a functional aspect of corpus luteum. When it starts degeneration, placenta takes over to maintain pregnancy. So again, there must be a very well-defined balance between the functional aspect of corpus luteum and placenta. Both of them are producing progesterone, which is associated with maintenance of pregnancy. But the initial phase, the corpus luteum is the main source of progesterone, whereas with the development and once the fully functional placenta is there, placenta would take over and produce progesterone for the remaining period of the pregnancy. And if there is no successful fertilization, of course, corpus luteum would definitely degenerate early, and there is no point in talking about the development of placenta. So implantation, the time of implantation, it normally takes around 5 weeks in cattle and horses. So if we just look into the total organization of endocrinal manipulation with respect to reproduction, we have to think of in this way, how to organize the endocrinal system in such a way. If you are an animal breeder and want to have a system where you just want to minimize the time gap between two reproductive cycle or between two pregnant gestational period, you just manipulate the endocrinal system in such a way that once one parturition is over, you just get the weaning period to minimize, so that the young calves, they can be separated from their mother, and the mother's endocrinal orientation can be manipulated in such a way that they would stop lactation and again come into estrus, and the earlier the better. So in that way, you'd have a higher production or a higher number of breeding cycle throughout the year. So that is one of the very important aspect of reproductive orientation, where any breeder would try to reduce the weaning period, so that from one pregnancy, the gap between two pregnancies can actually be minimized. And after giving birth to the individuals, very rapidly, the cows, they get back to their normal reproductive cycle and producing the next batch of young ones. So that is one. But if you want to have a dairy breed sort of thing, you can go for increasing this weaning period, so that the female, they become lactating for a longer period of time, and then you shorten and then you induce the next phase of pregnancy, so that again the females become lactating, and in this way, throughout the year, you get some amount of female to be lactating in nature, so you can have a more amount of milk available. Now, for bovine species, as they are polystress and they can actually have reproductive cycle, they undergo the reproductive cycle throughout the year. They are not seasonal for that matter. They can undergo reproductive cycle. The estrous cycle is taking place throughout the year. The distress phase between the two reproductive cycles are very limited. Normally, the beef cattle, the cattle which are being produced for meat, they are manipulated to undergo spring calving. So during spring, when the natural food availability is more, and they would be having calving during that particular time, so that it would minimize the labor cost, and as they are mainly associated with production of meat, the main objective of the producers will be related to their growth. On the other hand, if you consider about the dairy cattle, where we have talked about this, okay, we need to have milk, and the mothers, they should be lactating throughout the year, so year-round calving should be there, and milk production will be there. So accordingly, with respect to your objective, you can manipulate the endocrinal orientation. If you want a lactating mother throughout the year, so you'd be basically oriented with limiting the progesterone secretion, so that the gestational period can be very much reduced, and immediately after fertilization, as soon as possible, the mother goes to parturition and develops milk and start lactating. On the other hand, if you are mainly oriented with meat, you'd be definitely limiting the amount of reproduction and more concentrate on producing meat muscle. In equine species and horses, they are seasonally polyester. So again, we are coming into a condition where species-specific endocrinal manipulation has to be considered. If you are oriented with horse, then which are seasonally polystress, they are polystress, but their reproductive cycle are actually limited during the spring and summer. So during spring and summer, they undergo repeated reproductive cycles, and their ovarian activity that increases with the increased day length. Again, this is a very interesting orientation. We can just manipulate the environmental cues in different animals, and thereby entraining their endogenous endocrinal homeostasis in such a way that they can undergo the process of reproductive organization, reproductive orientation. And the ovarian activity can actually be induced or manipulated with artificial lighting with respect to these seasonal breeders. You can just extend the period of light so that they would think that the reproductive season is being enhanced. So accordingly, as they are undergoing repeated reproductive cycle during a specific season, by increasing the length of that specific season, we can actually have a better chance or more chance of having more number of youngs. For the porcine species, they are polystress, and that occurs all year long. So the breeding manipulation for this this porcine species are quite easy in that sense, because they can again undergo repeated reproductive cycles throughout the year. And for the ovine or the caprine species like the goats and sheep, they are polystress, but again there is a definite reproductive season mainly occurring during the fall and the winter. So in those cases, the manipulation of light can again be done, but in a differential way. For them, the reducing of day length actually act as a stimulus for undergoing reproduction. So just by looking into this veterinary manipulation, the endocrinal manipulation that can be done with respect to alter the breeding orientation and there's cattles. We can administer prostaglandin F2 alpha, which causes rupturing of corpus luteum, so that the animal are brought into estrus. As we are talking about that estrus cycle, estrus, once the animals are being brought into estrus, they would allow the males to copulate. That would go for the next reproductive pregnancy period. So if there is no successful pregnancy for one particular reproductive cycle, and you're just waiting, the breeder is just waiting, or the producer is just waiting, okay, the entire cycle would be over, there to take its normal course of time, and once the corpus luteum is degenerated normally, then only they would again come into reproductive cycle. Forget about that, administer prostaglandin F2 alpha, and immediately the corpus luteum would be degenerated, and the gap between two female reproductive cycle would be limited, would be reduced. So there would be, because they are polyestrous, and if you can just reduce the gap between two reproductive cycles, that would enhance the chance of production success. Then progesterone, or we can also use the synthetic progesterone, which can suppresses the ovary and prevents estrus, aids in pregnancy maintenance. So just by administering progesterone, we can simulate the pregnancy period, or the ambience of pregnancy within a subject, and by elongating or helping in maintenance of pregnancy, again that would ensure that, okay, the productivity would remain in a balanced way. So on one hand, you can actually induce reproductive cycle, and on the other hand, you can suppress the reproductive cycle, maintaining the gestational period. Thereby, for one batch, you can actually undergo with, because the management system, if altogether all the cows and all the animals are in the farm is being impregnated, that may be a managemental hazard. So you can just have a orientation that this group of cows or this group of animals, we need to have reproduction at this particular moment, and for other group of animals, we don't need to have reproduction for this particular moment. So you can just manipulate the two groups with respect to endocrinal orientation, that one group is being reduced with their reproductive or cycle, so that they get into estrus very quickly, and on the other hand, you are suppressing the reproductive cycle, so that there is differentiation in terms of coming into estrus for the two groups. Then HCG, which is comparable to LH, it can actually induce ovulation. So if you want to induce ovulation, you can always manipulate them with HCG, administration of HCG. Then oxytocin is another one which is associated with induction of labor. So by injecting oxytocin, we can induce labor, and we can just augment the process of parturition. On the other hand, oxytocin is also being given. In many cases, we find that the cattle's the milk we are getting are often, we become a bit skeptic about consuming milk, because the animals are being injected, and they are definitely being injected with oxytocin, so that the cows, they cannot hold back the milk within their udder. Once oxytocin is being injected, they are bound to release all the milk, whatever which has been produced. So altogether, if you want to increase the production of milk or release of milk, or your availability of milk for a particular cow, we can always give it oxytocin injection. Then dexamethasone is one synthetic drug which is often being used for inducing labor. And of course, not endocrinal, but environmental manipulation by altering the day length with addition of artificial light into the system can also be used to manipulate the reproductive orientation in cattle. Now, coming to my field of study, rather, where I'm more comfortable with, that is, if we consider fish. Now, fish is definitely one of a very important source of animal protein, and often they have been considered cheap source of animal protein. Countries like India, where there is plenty of resources, with water resources where aquaculture practices can be done, definitely fish is one of the very important animal protein source. So whenever we have looked into, or we have the total aquaculture scenario has been changed from capture fisheries to culture fisheries, the most prominent one, the most important or significant scientific discovery associated with aquaculture is definitely the process of induced breeding. As you can see, we can just extract out the pituitary and make extraction from the pituitary gland, so that the basic concept is like to get the FSH and LH, the gonadotropins from the pituitary, and then inject the pituitary extract into a potent male and potent female. And once the extract is being injected, definitely there are ways. I'm not going into those details. Those are being done nowadays during the secondary or higher secondary things. Those are pretty nominal to go for. But anyway, these are definitely endocrinal manipulations where this FSH and LH being administered to the fish, both in male and female, can actually induce milting in males and ovulation in females. And we can just get out or we can take out this milt from the males and the eggs from the ovary of the female in a trough, plastic trough, or in a limited space, and then the milt can be administered over the ovum, and fertilization can be performed in an artificial way outside of the body of the female, and definitely not in pond water, but in closed buckets. So once that has been done, the success rate of reproduction, the success rate of fertilization is greatly enhanced. So definitely we are going to have a much higher rate of successful fertilization, and the production level also very much increased. So this endocrinal manipulation is actually very much important with respect to increasing the production level. And nowadays, this concept of hypophysation and taking out the pituitary in markets, often we see people who are just putting a sort of a long syringe-like thing in through the mouth of the fish and getting out some the pituitary gland and keeping it in alcohol and all this, and then sending it to the laboratory and making extracts of pituitary extracts for subsequent marketing. Now different synthetic hormones are actually being used for this purpose of induced breeding. One of the very common one is overprim, which is a combination of analog of salmon GnRH. So okay, salmon GnRH is a very potent GnRH which can be applied to different fish species as well. And this salmon GnRH is consisting of the native peptide found in most teleoid fishes. So that is compatible for administration to all different group of fishes as well. So we just don't have to be restricted with respect to cross-reactivity and all this, because they are highly cross-reactive, so we can just administer them in different group of fishes. And they also contain a dopamine inhibitor. Now, dopamines are, we all know about this. This is basically an inhibitor for FSH-LH secretion. So by inhibiting dopamine, we are inducing the functional activity of the gonadotropin. So on one hand, we are giving GnRH, which is going to stimulate the stimulate the production of FSH and LH from the pituitary. And on the other hand, we are also adding to it the dopamine inhibitor, which is inhibiting the functional activity of dopamine, which is regulated for the functions of FSH and LH in a negative way. So dopamine inhibits the functional activity of FSH and LH. So whenever this such inhibition is being lifted by administration of dopamine inhibitor like domperidone. So in overprim, we have this salmon GnRH analog along with domperidone. In combination with these two, they can induce ovulation, they can induce more production in fish. So the fish will become induce maturation very rapidly and after injections. Overtide is another commercial product which is highly active and ready to use solution. It again contains the GnRH analog, a synthetic peptide, and definitely a dopamine antagonist. So whatever is a synthetic product with respect to administration of synthetic hormones or induced breeding in fish, that has to be done with any type of GnRH and any type of dopamine inhibitor. Now, these are some common examples of hormones which are often being used in, coming back to the cattle industry actually, which are used in cattle industry. The estradiol and progesterone in combination are often being used for lactation, milk letdown. For that we use oxytocin, and and estrus synchronization we use PGF2 alpha. As we have talked about, that PGF2 alpha is mainly associated with degeneration of corpus luteum, so that if you just administer is PGF2 alpha altogether to all the available individual in the farm, so definitely they are going to come into stress simultaneously. We don't have to think about, okay, this particular animal is going to come into stress at this month, and some others would be coming into stress at some other month. Okay, and that would be increasing the cost associated with maintenance, cost associated with artificial insemination and all this. But all of them coming to stress at the same time, that is definitely much easy for management practices. But the next part, which is I'm going to talk about, is mainly associated with the growth promoters. Often growth promoters are being introduced into cattle or in fishes as well. I'll be coming to that again, for induction of growth. And mostly there's 17-alpha estradiol, progesterone, the testosterones, zeranol, trebolone, and melanogastrol acetate or MGA. Some of them are natural hormones, some of them are synthetic hormones, which are being used in industry for induction of growth in cattle. Now, there is a long history associated with growth in hormonal implementation to induce growth in animals. It was used in beef production industry, in cattle industry, and the first implant that was used was diethylstilbestrol or DES. So it's definitely a synthetic estrogen, and DES is also being used as human medicine in different human reproductive failures in females. And in cattle industry, it was induced in 1950s in Iowa State University. The animal scientists in that university, they used DES for induction of growth in cattle. And they have been approved by the FDA as well during this 1950s. They can either be used as an implant or they can be added to the feed so that growth induction is being made. And these implants are mostly estrogenic in nature before to 1987. But after that, another synthetic substance came, the trenbolone acetate, which was cleared for use, and that was androgenic in nature. So normally we may have think, okay, using some androgenic substances would have been better for inducing more growth, but that was not actually true in terms of animal growth induction. The animals were first induced or first treated with a different type of estrogenic compounds for growth induction, because often it's been considered the induction or administration of androgenic compounds may have something to do with greater amount of or higher amount of aggression and some other side effects as well, which has been considered, which is not very much conducive for farm management. So that people are thinking about, okay, better use steroids, which are mainly estrogenic in nature, that can induce growth, but we don't have any sort of behavioral related problem associated with it. So, but later on it was found, okay, that's a sort of taboo which should be neglected, and people thought about using androgenic compound as well, along with either solely or in association with the estrogenic compounds. And why people have thought about to use these steroids, to be more precise, for growth induction? Why not directly go for growth hormone itself? Or why people have thought that yes, some sort of steroids would be very much useful. So it's been found that there is hormone-dependent sex differences in growth rate. In some species, it's been found that, okay, one particular sex is growing more, in some other, the opposite sex is growing more. So whenever you're finding that there is a dimorphic growth pattern with respect to sex. So people thought, okay, definitely sex hormones can actually have an impact over growth. And in very interestingly, for castrated males, the growth rate was, and the feed conversion efficiency, that how much amount of food is being consumed by the animal and how much is actually being transformed into lean mass or protein mass of that food. How much of that food is being converted into protein mass, that was more in case of normal males compared to the castrated ones. So then people thought, okay, whenever we are castrating the animals, we are removing the gonads from the animals, then it definitely is having some impact over its growth, because the normal ones with intact gonads are growing more. So the hormones which are being produced by the gonad is definitely having an impact over, it's definitely an anabolic hormones which can have an impact over growth. But now that is quite interesting to find out that the castrated males, the males are being castrated again mostly for the purpose of farm management, because they are subdued, they are more docile in nature, not that much of aggression. They didn't show that much of aggression, so they are easy to handle with. And in certain cases, the efficiency with respect to feed conversion is altered in such a way that the castrated males, they tend to produce more amount of fat. They tend to have more adipose deposition in their body. So ultimately, they grow with more amount of fat. And if you just want to have some sort of, if you do want to prefer the meat with more amount of fatty substances within it, so that would make it more tasty in one particular way. So people want to have castrated males. But if you would like to have more growth, then the normal males are showing greater growth rate and higher feed conversion efficiency. So people have thought, okay, if we just go for castrating the males and then administering a balanced amount of anabolic steroids, a combination of estrogen and testosterone, maybe we can come into a situation where it's a win-win situation, where the subjects, the animals become docile, they become easy to handle. But on the other hand, the meat quality remains good, the lean mass is better, there is not that much amount of adipose being deposited, and the meat quality for that matter would be better. So in this way, the concepts they have developed for administration of hormones as growth induction. Normally in cattle, the use of hormones are limited to veal calves and the beef cattle, mainly the ones which are being used for meat production. The veal means the young ones, mostly the males from the dairy breeds, which have no use for, no subsequent use. So they are being slaughtered and used as meat, and the beef cattle is there. For sheep, there is some experimental evidences where we are finding that there is increase in gain, but the results are often ambiguous. Swine, the hormone treatment can increase growth rate, FC, the lean mass is to fat ratio in male castrates as well. So in male castrate, you administer hormone and you get better results. In case of poultry birds, there is not that much of evidence as where estrogen is found to increase weight gain. But there is a tendency that lipid pattern of lipid deposition with estrogen administration in birds can change. And mostly the hormones which are being used for animal productions can have two different origins. They can be of endogenous origin, which is endogenous means they are normally being produced by the animal, like the steroid hormones, estradiol 17 beta, testosterone, progesterone, and you are administering these endogenous hormones so that the concentration, the peripheral concentration of this hormone is being increased. On the other hand, you can use some exogenous hormones from exogenous origins, which are synthetic in nature, not normally found in the body, like this DES, exoesterol, TBA, or MGA, which are synthetic in origin and being given, they just can mimic the functional activity of the endogenous hormones, thereby increasing the production. There is this particular graph, which is, or rather data, which has been taken from FAO. They have said that these are the different substances which can be used at different doses either as feed additives or implants in different group of animals like the steers, the heifers, mainly the different forms of cows. These steers and heifers are the heifers are they are either the female ones which are yet to be impregnated, or they are the castrated males, the steers of the castrated males who are supposed to be produced for meat purpose, and the heifers are normal females that yet to undergo calving. So they are before calving, the female cows are they are being called as heifers, and once castrated, the male cow, the male bulls, they are called as steers. So they have been administered with DS, extrasterol, and zeronol, and have different sort of functional implications with increased growth of this. And as we have said, they can either be applied through feed additives in the, and once being consumed, they would be reaching into the muscles through metabolism and then elicit their functional effect. But more common of method of utilization is like hormone implants. So often we see this type of pictures in the foreign countries, the foreign firms, they have this type of tagging over the animals. That okay, these taggings are basically related to hormone implants, which are growth hormones are or different types of this DS or testosterone are being given through this particular mechanism, where the cartridges are being placed through a needle, through an injection mechanism at the site of the ear, and from that, gradually the hormones are being entering within the peripheral circulation system. So in this way, we can check the residual effect of hormones as well. How much to administer and how long to administer, this can also be manipulated, and the functional effect becomes more while implantation is being or implants are being used for hormone administration. But definitely feed additives is also one good alternative, and both of these methodologies have their own pros and cons related to the function. Now, they can either influence the change in balance of endogenous hormones just by administering the exogenous one. You can alter the endogenous hormonal balance, thereby increasing one particular hormone compared to the other. So if you administer exogenous testosterone, or if you administer some exogenous androgenic component like TBA, that is going to increase the endogenous androgenic hormones as well, thereby disrupting the balance of the endogenous hormones, and that in turn can stimulate growth. Or they can have an effect over the levels of growth hormone production, like this TBA, DS, and TBA. They can increase growth hormone production, or they can increase the peripheral concentration of growth hormone and insulin, which would definitely going to stimulate amino acid transport across the cell membrane, thereby stimulating growth. So it can be a functional effect where the hormones are acting through manipulation of endogenous hormone balance, or they can acting as an manipulator of growth hormone production or insulin production, thereby increasing growth. Like it's been found that the dietary DES, it is increasing plasma testosterone level in bulls. So experimentations are being going on with the administration of these hormones and trying to find out how these hormones are actually working to increase growth. Now, DES are reducing the rate of muscle catabolism. So whenever the muscle catabolic rate is being reduced, that is increasing the deposition of protein in the muscles, thereby increasing lean mass muscle. Then anabolic androgens, they can compete with the glucocorticoid receptors on the muscle cell membrane. Thereby, glucocorticoids, they are helping in catabolic mechanism. So whenever the anabolic steroids are binding with their receptors but not eliciting any functional impact like that of glucocorticoids, they can reduce catabolism, thereby enhancing lean muscle mass. So depending on the functional mechanism of different hormones, and one can use a different type of endocrinal substances, or endocrinal manipulation can actually be done in this regard. So again, some questions may arise. Okay, you are administering some exogenous hormones. Is it going to alter the normal balance? And definitely, it's going to alter the normal balance. And what would be the ill effect of these hormones? What would be the effect of these hormones over the consumers if they are being deposited in the muscles, if there is any residual effect? So again, people have worked on this foray and tried to find out that, okay, normally whatever amount of estradiol or testosterone is being found in animals who are grown without administration of any exogenous hormone, and that's quite high. And even if you are administering a certain amount of these exogenous hormones to the animals, it's been found that the residual effect is not that much prominent with this regard, because there's a wool calf muscle, the wheel calf muscle, they are having estradiol normally less than 100 picogram per ml, whereas testosterone has 70 picogram per gram. The heifer muscle, they contain around 12 to 13 picogram per ml of estradiol, 17 beta estradiol, 92 picogram per gram of testosterone. So altogether, the muscles, there is certain amount of steroid hormones which are being found in those parts of the body which we consume. So if that, even if the subjects are not being administered with any exogenous hormone, so it's not like whenever the animal is being injected or being given some sort of exogenous hormone, then only the residual effect can be there. Normally as well, there can be certain amount of hormones being present over the organs which we consume. But the question is whether that particular concentration is important for the consumers, whether it is going to alter the physiological activities of the consumers or not. That has to be considered. Even if we find that, okay, whatever the limit of hormone is around 500 picogram per ml, and we are having the hormone at around less than 100 picogram per ml, even if we administer them with some exogenous hormone, which is comparable with that of the endogenous hormone concentration being present in the organ which we consume, definitely administration of exogenous hormone is okay. So that is the consideration of the FDA people, the regulatory bodies, which will think about, which will look after the hormonal concentration in the residual activity or residual presence of these hormones in the consuming part, mostly in the muscles, and then can talk about whether it is safe to consume or not. Coming to the next part, that is again in fisheries, that's my foray. Some hormones are there which can also be used for larval rearing of fishes as well, like this L-troxin. It is used to accelerate the development of yolk sac. So you are inducing metamorphosis so that the growth rate is being stimulated. The yolk sac is being developed more there, and the milkfish fry development is becoming rapid, so that the transformation from one stage of growth to the other is being enhanced. So the growth rate would be stimulated. So during larval rearing, we can administer different, mostly the thyroxine group of hormones that can induce metamorphosis and lead towards better, higher growth rate in fishes. And then during the grow-out phases, where we want to maximize the fish growth, limiting or minimizing the cost of production. So if you just want to gain, say, around 1 kg of fish, and you can achieve that growth by 6 months rather than the standard procedure of 1 year. So definitely you are going to implement that particular management practice, where the required growth of 1 kg can be achieved by 6 months rather than 1 year, which would definitely going to increase your production cost. So in these orientations, people are using farmers, they are using different growth enhancers, the growth stimulators, and endocrinology definitely can assist in the process. They can actually induce growth, limiting reproduction, because we all know that whenever an animal is transforming from somatic growth to reproduction, it is definitely channelizing more amount of energy, or energy allocation is tilted towards reproductive organs rather than towards somatic growth. So definitely a phase of life comes when the subject is not growing in terms of size, but rather it is whatever it is consuming in terms of food, it is channelizing towards reproduction. So definitely that is not very much pervaded by the farmers, aqua farmers. So they would train to limit that energy allocation from reproduction towards reproduction, and try to gain more energy allocation towards growth. So endocrinology gives them this impetus. So yes, we can manipulate the endocrinal orientation of the fishes so that the more amount of energy would definitely be going towards growth rather than reproduction. So hormones like androgens, estrogens, thyroid hormones, the growth hormone, pituitary extract, those can be implemented to induce growth in or to promote growth in fishes. And in different group of fishes, it is being observed that we are talking about this dimorphic growth in between the sexes, where the males have been found to be grow more than the females. We often use androgens or to produce monosex type of fish, where all the members of the population would be of a particular sex, so that the growth advantage is there. So they would be growing more, and production would definitely be more. I actually work in this particular field where we try to induce sex reversal, or try to induce production of one particular sex of fish, thereby promoting growth in fishes. And management system associated with this endocrinology is again very much oriented with respect to growth induction. If there is stress, so today morning itself we had a lot of discussion about how stress can actually manipulate or affect our physiological system, and how cortisol and the catecholamines are oriented with respect to the responses towards stress. By manipulating these hormones, the cortisol and the catecholamines, we can ultimately limit tertiary responses in terms of growth, disease resistance, swimming capacity, behavior, and reproduction. So these endocrinal manipulations can again be very much effective with respect to aquaculture management. The stresses like pollution, capture or handling, or sound, presence of a predator, all these can have an endogenous endocrinal disorientation. The response of the fish should be diverse, manipulating the endogenous endocrinal organization so that the response would be to increase the hormone level. Then there would be change in the metabolic activities with increase in glucose and lactate. Immune functions would be altered. So altogether, the management system in fisheries are also very much oriented with this endocrinal manipulation. You can give the fishes a conducible environment with less amount of stress, and definitely the fishes are going to grow more. The production level would definitely be more with a minimum amount of stress being provided. But is it all a boon? Whenever we are inducing growth in fishes, we are inducing reproduction in animals through endocrinal manipulation. Isn't there any concern? Nowadays, all this, the organic farming has become very prominent in forests. Mainly the urban consumers, they are always look into the pack whether the product is organically produced or not. That means the product is not being given any sort of synthetic substances for their growth or for their production during their production procedures. So natural hormones are often being used in these scenarios rather than using the synthetic substances. Go for natural things. And in aquaculture, mainly, I do work. There are some undesirable side effects associated with this synthetic substances. They can sometimes cause a change in body conformation. You give hormones, some anabolic ones to increase growth, but those are estrogenic in nature and they are causing feminization. Or it's been found that there is increasing bulling frequency. The bull steer syndrome is one typical syndrome in the steers. As we have said, they are castrated males, so they are not supposed to be undergoing any performance of population. But here, within a group of steers, it's been found that some steers, they are mounting, they are showing mounting behavior, they are showing a bit of more aggression. which is not like the steers, but like a bull. So that's why it's been called as a bull steer syndrome. So by administering DES or other synthetic substances to increase growth, it's been found that these sort of undesirable side effects can definitely be there. So considering those aspects, people are working on natural alternatives with respect to growth induction and reproductive manipulation in animals. In the last few slides, actually, I'll be discussing about what I do in our lab. We work with the tilapia model, which is very much showing a definite type of dimorphic growth pattern. The males are growing much larger compared to the females, and also the males are showing a sort of uniform growth. The females are having a differential sort of growth pattern. Some of the females are big, some of the females are small, and whenever there is a mixed sort of culture, the males, they are growing bigger compared to the females, altogether having a mixed sort of production, which is not good for the aquafarmers. So we tend to have a uniform growth pattern, and that is achievable through production of monosex fishes. And often such monosex production of male tilapia is being performed with different sort of synthetic hormones like 17-alpha methyl testosterone, which is a very potent androgen for inducing sex change. So what we do is like we add the hormone with the feed, or we immerse the larvae within the solution of this hormone, synthetic hormone, or we can just inject them with the synthetic hormones. There are methods, definitely the feeding method is the most suitable one. And we can just convert all the members of the population, irrespective of their genotypic sex, into males. So they are phenotypically going to be males. Whether they are XX or XY, that doesn't matter. You treat them with the hormone and you get a population of altogether of phenotypical males. So that would serve the purpose. Now, these are very important in aquaculture, as we have talked about. Okay, depending on the species you are working with, you can use androgens or you can use estrogens like 17-beta estradiol, or androgens like MT that we have talked. But again, the concern is like whether these will have some residual effect or not. You are using steroids, which are synthetic in nature, and is it going to affect the consumers, the consumption of fishes being treated with hormone? Is there any residual effect? So in order to prevent any such controversy of administration of hormones impending in this residual effect and all this, we are in our lab, we are looking for different natural alternatives for production of this monosex tilapia. We have used different types of plant materials for their productions, like there's Basil alba, mucuna. All these are scientific names, but the common names, these are pretty much. Basil alba is normal spinach we actually use. So all these have medicinal properties, and they are having some aphrodisiac effects, affecting the normal or the endogenous endocrinal balance within the fish. That has to be administered at a very specific time frame when the fish were undergoing the process of development. At a very specific phase of their life, the gonad, they remain as bipotential and can be used with this particular solutions or these particular feeding additives, ultimately producing male fishes altogether. And not only we are able to produce male fish or male populations by administering these different plant substances. These are also having an impact over increasing the immune responses. They are stimulating the innate immunities. They are also acting as a growth stimulators, growth enhancers. So all the purpose of unwanted reproduction, growth stimulation, immunostimulation can be served by applications of these different plant materials. And they are organic as well. So we are looking for finding out a definite most suitable treatment regime and most suitable plant substances that can actually be used for increasing animal productions. And we can think of endocrinal manipulation to enhance food security, at least from the fishery point of view by increasing fish production. And tilapia is one of the good model for that, because nowadays tilapia is very well coveted, but the prices are comparatively low than others, some other high priced fishes, but they are very much nutritious in nature. So altogether, we are trying to go for work on this endocrinal manipulation for growth induction, and moving towards food security, at least in our countries. These are some of my results where we can actually find that yes, by administration of plant substances and by culturing monosex species, we can have higher growth and immunostimulations in tilapia at least. So that's all, and thank you for your very patient listening. Almost 1.5 hours have passed, so it's like, thank you again. Okay, so okay, so let's go through here. Hello.
Yeah. Yes. I hope there are some questions. I hope you have completed your presentation, right?
Yeah. I have completed my presentation. I'm
Yeah.
just
Thank you so
waiting
much,
for
sir,
you
for your
to get
lecture.
back.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir, for your lecture. And we have some questions. Shall I forward those questions to you?
Yeah, definitely. I can and try to answer your questions.
So the first question is how to increase the life expectancy and fertility rates among the zoo animals in case of hybrid variety.
Okay, the basic problem with the hybrid variety is we are actually manipulating with the genetic orientations of this species. So just by manipulating some endocrinal orientation, there is not that much way, because hybrids, if it is not normally happening in nature, then it's very difficult for their sustenance, because often we are finding that the next generation of the hybrids are mostly not viable. Some viability is definitely there in certain cases, but mostly they're not viable. They become sterile in nature, and such genetic hybridization is really, people are working actually to increase their viability and increase their lifespan, life expectancy altogether. And mostly in zoo animals, to be more precise, this sort of work is now being stopped. We had in our Calcutta zoo some of these crossovers, some of the hybrids between the lions and the tigers. But presently, that work of hybridization are completely stopped because of those problems associated with that life expectancy and all those. So the works are going on to produce a bit more, what should I say, more vigorous sort of hybrid, more with greater life expectancy. At this moment, I just cannot say that this should be done. Yes.
Yeah. The next question would be gene transplantation and artificial insemination has bad impact on the digestive system and therefore survivability. What is your opinion on this?
Okay, producing this transgenics, it's a much, again, a very debatable issue. The environmental biologists, they are often saying that, okay, no, these are not at all being advocated, shouldn't be advocated. But on the other hand, the genetic biologists, they're saying, okay, nature has evolved through such type of combinations, through such type of trial and error methods. So if those transgenics can actually survive in nature, it's fine. But the question associated with the digestive system problem, that may be issues with some of the transgenics. So if that particular transgenic which is having some digestive system problems and cannot be sustained in nature or cannot be sustained in artificial environment of or controlled environment as well, those products, because we are producing transgenics to have better quality of production. So if that is not there, if the goal is not achieved, transgenics are not to be continued with. Such transgenics are not to be continued with. So again, some trial and error methods are definitely there. So with respect to this production of this.
Yes, shall pass on to the next question. The next question is that zoo elephants died consuming more foods. Sometimes the tigers and especially white tigers are died. What are the causes behind this?
There can be a multitude of causes behind death of zoo animals. Not necessarily they're consuming more food, and that's because of consuming more food. Even if we consider more amount of food which cannot be digested by us, then that can cause that can lead to health problems. So that's true for them as well. And often these white tigers, they are again some mutated ones because of reduced amount of melanin pigmentations. Maybe the actual cause of death was associated more with their genes having reduced immunological powers rather than because of overfeeding, because they cannot sustain those overfeeding. That can actually happen. And for elephants who have died due to overfeeding, maybe some digestive